The first ever edition of the Club World Cup just ended, and with its first ever champion already crowned, I am left with a couple questions. How good or bad was this tournament really? There was a lot of talk before and during this tournament, but now that it's all done and over, we can actually analyze the entire tournament and come to a good rounded conclusion. So let's talk specifics. Let's talk about controversies coming into the tournament, key moments throughout the tournament, the worst parts of it, the best parts of it, and what's to come, what's next for this tournament. Before the start of this competition, there were many factors that questioned the validity, importance, or actual need for this tournament. Things like a lack of interest from certain teams, Europe. The overexploitation of players not allowing them their vacation time, leading to potential injuries in the longer season. Lack of competitiveness from any team outside of Europe. The country hosting the tournament being inept in doing so, considering the catastrophe that was the final of the Copa America last year and its current political state. And finally, low attendance at the stadiums. I think the first concern, which was the lack of interest from European teams, got shattered immediately when we started seeing how PSG, Atletico Madrid, Manchester City started lining up their 11s. I think the fear that European teams would not be interested in this tournament was so immediately wiped away with the millions of dollars these teams would get after winning a game or going forward into the competition. Now, the overexploitation of the players is actually a very valid concern that we are still to see the results of, but I think regardless of this competition happening or not, players on this level would be playing during this time anyway with their national teams in the UEFA Nations League, CONCACAF Nations League, Gold Cup, Copa America, whatever tournament applies to their continent. Now, the lack of rest for the players is something that is yet to be seen what the effects are going to be on the players until the next season starts. Now, the lack of competitiveness is something that was hilariously disproven by Botafogo when they beat PSG 1-0 at the Rose Bowl in one of the first games of the tournament. Then it was also disproven by Al Hilal when they held Real Madrid to a draw, or when Flamengo beat the eventual champions of this competition 3-1. Teams from all across the world proved to be very competitive. Even those that got humiliated in the first game eventually got even a draw from the last one. The actual hosting of the tournament was a very valid concern and got proven right, but for different reasons. Before the competition even began, ICE confirmed that they were going to be the official security at the stadiums, making people that live in the United States a little more scared to going to this tournament and being harassed for no reason. That being said, I haven't heard of a single case of racial profiling or deportation from a stadium at the FIFA Club World Cup. To go even further, I was at multiple games during this competition and I haven't seen a single ICE agent present at these stadiums. The reason the United States ended up being a terrible host was actually because of the weather, but we'll get more into that a little bit further into the video. Finally, stadium attendance. Although there were some terrible attendance at certain games like the LAFC, the Chelsea game in Atlanta, or the Boca Juniors against Auckland City in Tennessee, I think overall it wasn't as bad as people try to make it out to be. America likes to go big, we know this, and it's no exception for the stadiums. So in doing so, it makes it harder to sell out the whole stadium. Let's put River Plate against Monterrey as an example. There was 60,000 people at that game, which only meant that about 60% of the stadium was full. The reality is, if that game was played in most stadiums in Europe instead of the Rose Bowl, it would have been sold out. But since Rose Bowl holds almost 100,000 people in there, it looks half empty. Once you move this tournament to a country that actually likes the sport, that has accessible transportation to the stadiums, I think you will have all-round sold-out stadiums. I think the United States just was not the appropriate host for this first-time event. Anyways, let's move on to the bad things of this tournament, the things that left a sour taste in our mouth, the things that need to be changed by the next Club World Cup in 2029. Number 1, the stadium conditions. As I previously mentioned, the weather was not ideal for a tournament to be held in the United States. When Qatar hosted the World Cup, they talked about it for years ahead of the tournament that the weather was going to be bad, it was going to be too hot. They moved the tournament to winter to accommodate fans and the players equally. The stadiums were enclosed and had AC. Why was none of this taken into consideration for this tournament? In the United States, they decided to play it in the middle of summer with open stadiums, making fans and players uncomfortable, having to sit and play in unbearable heat. This led players to complain about the conditions that they were playing in, and then fans getting lifetime sunburns. A very simple solution to this was having the games being played at stadiums with closed roofs and then being played at nighttime. It's not like the US has a lack of closed stadiums too. On the top of my head, we have AT&T Stadium, SoFi, Allegiant Stadium, just a bunch of stadiums that were there and weren't used for this tournament. One of the first games of this tournament was PSG against Atletico Madrid in Rose Bowl in Pasadena, California, at noon in the middle of summer. A ridiculous choice considering 35 minutes away, you had SoFi just sitting there. A covered venue with AC that players and fans would have taken advantage of. Another consequence was getting matches temporarily suspended for like 2 hours because of potential electrical storms. This happened many times during the tournament. The most notable one was in the round of 16 when Chelsea was beating Benfica 1-0 in the 85th minute. They suspend the game for 2 hours, and Benfica actually in the last 5 minutes after 2 hours ties the game. This would have been very controversial if it wasn't for Chelsea actually scoring 3 goals after that and going through comfortably in the extra time. But if they had closed stadiums for this, it wouldn't have been a problem. 2. The political backdrop. Another thing to add to the bad things of this tournament was the political backdrop that the United States was facing whilst the tournament was being played in their country. From the Juventus players being present while Donald Trump was threatening to bomb other countries, to players being asked about the riots in California after they play there when they are neither American or involved with the riots at all. All the way to ICE claiming they'd be the official security of the Club World Cup. That made fans anxious to go to the games. I personally know multiple people that did not go to these events because they were scared of what ICE could do. Moving on, number 3, the Americanization of the sport. This one might be petty, but one thing I did not like about this tournament was FIFA trying to implement these American tendencies into our beautiful sport. An example of this is having the players walk out one by one as they were announcing their names. This made the build up to the game boring, slower. I did not like it. I know some people might have, but I personally did not enjoy this. The halftime interviews with the coaches. I only saw a couple of these, but they did happen. Now imagine being Auckland City's coach after being 6-0 down in halftime, having an interviewer come to you and be like, what is your plan for the second half? What are you supposed to say? I don't know. I just think it's awkward and it's not part of our game. It might make sense in basketball, might make sense in a different sport. It does not make sense in soccer, football, whatever you want to call it. Finally, the halftime shows. We do not need this. It happened in the Copa America last year already, and the reality is the only thing that the halftime show does is distract from the actual game. You can do the whole pre-match show and do whatever you want, all the fireworks and stuff. That makes sense. I enjoy those. But in the middle of the game when fans are thinking about their team, in this case PSG thinking about how they're losing 3-0, you don't want to be looking at a halftime show. I just think it does not make sense in this context. It's supposed to be a 15-minute half, and it just makes that longer for no reason. A little bonus one for you guys. One of the worst things I saw this tournament was Donald Trump not leaving the stage to leave the Chelsea players to lift the trophies on their own. Trump had to get in the middle, had to be a part of that. It was just awkward, uncomfortable for everyone, especially considering the entire stadium booed him beforehand. It was terrible. Anyways, let's move on to the best parts of this tournament. Things that we want to see again. Things that made this tournament memorable. First off, the fans. I think the fans really showed up, especially South American and Asian fans. They were on top of their game. I think Botafogo, Palmeiras, Flamengo, River Plate, they all showed up in an immense amount of numbers. It was incredible to see the amount of support South America had. River Plate alone took 30,000 people to LA when they played against Monterrey. An Argentinian team had more fans than a Mexican team in California. That was crazy. Palmeiras absolutely took over New York. The Urawa Red Diamond teams in Seattle were absolutely one of the best fans I've seen. So synchronized, so respectful, absolutely amazing. And then you had your casual European team fans that showed up to see Real Madrid, Chelsea, and put numbers into the stadiums that helped inflate the attendance at these stadiums. I don't know. I think the fans and the environments were the best part of this tournament. When we move this tournament to a different country, it's going to be even more amplified considering, again, the United States does not care about the sport. Now let's talk about the format. Although the tournament qualification process is a little weird and should be reviewed for the next tournament, I think the 32-team format is my favorite, and it's absolutely disappointing to see it disappear from so many other tournaments like the World Cup next year. I really hope that this tournament sticks with it, so at least we have one tournament with it. Not even the Champions League does the 32-team format anymore, and I just hope this tournament sticks with it because it makes every game intense and important, even the group stage. Number 3, the accessibility. We can complain about many things about this tournament, but the reality is that every single person in the world had the chance to watch the games for free. DAZN, their app, might be a little glitchy. I didn't like their app, but the reality is that any person could have watched these games either with their TV provider in their local country or DAZN. So you had different options to watch every single game of this tournament, And if you paid the premium experience, the visuals, the broadcast was actually very good. It was 4K HDR. It was top tier. It was one of the best broadcasts I've seen since the World Cup. So the accessibility, the fact that everyone could tune in and watch it free and legally is something that I hope gets repeated in the next tournament again. The competitiveness. I think this is one of the biggest things this tournament had. Let's just think about how many underdog stories there were. Let's think about how many surprises there were. Inter Miami beating Porto and getting out of the group stage. That was the first. Al Hilal taking a draw from Real Madrid and making it to the round of 16 and knocking Manchester City out. Just every Brazilian team. Botafogo beating PSG, the South American champions beating the European champions, then Fluminense making it to the semifinal, and then Flamengo beating Chelsea 3-1. Brazilian teams were on top of their game during this tournament. Very few people could have predicted most of the results this tournament had. This to me makes it a very exciting competition and proves that it was actually very competitive. Finally, let's talk about the ref cams and the announcing of VAR decisions at the stadiums. I think this is one of the underrated implementations during this Club World Cup and is something that every federation should take into consideration and start implementing in their own tournaments. Let's first talk about the ref cams. I think those were a great implementation. Sometimes as fans, we get annoyed at referees for making certain decisions, but seeing their perspective, I think it makes us a little more empathetic about what their decision on the field is and what they actually see. Sometimes there's a player blocking the play, or even seeing the repetitions of certain goals from their angle. It's just cool. I liked it. I think it's a fun implementation, and it's an extra little moment that can add to every broadcast. The second one is the actual announcement of the referees to the entire stadium when they make a VAR decision. MLS started doing this a while back, but every other country should actually start doing this as well. I think most times when you're at the stadium and there's a VAR call, as a fan, you don't really understand what happens because they wouldn't actually show the plays on the screens on the stadium. So as a fan, you don't know what they're calling, and then the decisions aren't clear. With all this being said, do I think this competition was a success? Yes, I do. I think this competition is here to stay. I think there will be multiple editions. I think this tournament made us realize that the world of soccer worldwide is just much closer than we thought. The competitiveness from South America to Europe is much closer than we previously have thought. It made us realize that any team in the world can compete against the big boys in Europe. It also showed that nobody can compete with the South American fans. I just think they are elite and they are the best fans in the world. Doesn't matter the country, they are always on top. They're always singing, they're always jumping, and they always show up in numbers no matter where they play. It's just amazing. It also shows that enough money can buy any team in the world, Europeans, to actually be interested in this tournament. So I think it was a success. I think some things were implemented, like the ref cams and stuff, that are interesting, that this tournament can start testing and be implemented in the next year's World Cup. So we'll see what happens. The next Club World Cup would be even more exciting if they leave a country that does not care about the beautiful game. If the rumors are true and the next Club World Cup is in South America, Brazil most likely, it will be the biggest tournament of the decade if that happens. I think it's going to be very nostalgic for all of us 2014 World Cup fans. I think it's going to be interesting to see all the South Americans actually be at home. I think stadiums will be sold out. It's going to be a very entertaining and very interesting competition. And that is it for me today. If you enjoyed this video, please like, subscribe. It helps me out a ton, and I'll see you in the next one.